Paris, August 1572. The city is buzzing. We're about to witness the political wedding of the century, designed to finally end decades of France tearing itself apart. In one corner, we have Marguerite de Valois, the king's sister, a Catholic. In the other, Henry of Navarre, the leader of the French Protestants, or Huguenots as they were called. The plan was simple: unite the two warring factions with a marriage, proving that love, or at least political convenience, conquers all. Thousands of Huguenot nobles traveled to the staunchly Catholic capital for the festivities. They were guests of honor, which is a lovely title to have right before you become the main event in a citywide murder spree. The optimism was so thick you could cut it with a knife. A sentiment that would, unfortunately, prove to be quite literal. Running this whole delicate operation was the Queen Mother, Catherine de' Medici. History paints her as a Machiavellian mastermind, but it's probably more accurate to see her as a perpetually stressed-out manager trying to keep her chaotic family business, the Kingdom of France, from imploding. Her son, King Charles IX, was impressionable. A young man who desperately wanted to be a strong king, but was mostly just good at following the last piece of advice he'd heard. Then there's the Huguenots' main man, Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, a charismatic military leader and the closest thing the Huguenots had to a celebrity. He was becoming a bit too influential with the king for Catherine's comfort. And finally, you have the Guise family, the ultra-Catholic hardliners who believed Huguenots were better suited for the graveyard than the royal court. They also personally blamed Coligny for the assassination of their dad a few years earlier, so no simmering tensions there at all. The wedding goes off. There's dancing, there are feasts. Everything seems fine for about 4 days. On August 22nd, Admiral Coligny is walking home from a meeting at the Louvre. An assassin takes a shot at him from a window. An incredibly terrible shot, as it turns out. The bullet rips off a finger and shatters his elbow, but Coligny survives. The would-be killer escapes on a horse conveniently provided by the Guise family. Subtle. This is what we call a catastrophic failure. Instead of eliminating a problem, the attacker just made the Huguenots extremely angry and paranoid. They storm into the king's chambers demanding justice and hinting at revenge, which is the 16th century equivalent of threatening to write a very strongly worded letter, but with swords. The royal court is now in full-blown panic mode. Catherine de' Medici and King Charles IX have a massive problem. They've failed to kill the one guy they probably wanted dead, and now his thousands of armed, angry followers are all conveniently located right outside their palace. The Huguenots are talking about raising an army. The Catholics in Paris are getting restless. The Guises are probably smiling somewhere. For Catherine, the carefully constructed peace she built this wedding on is about to shatter. In her mind, she had two options: either hand over the Guise family to the Huguenots for justice and risk a Catholic uprising, or find a much more permanent solution to the Huguenot problem. The historical record is murky on who decided what, but the next 24 hours suggest they didn't choose the path of peaceful negotiation. On the evening of August 23rd, a secret royal council meeting takes place. This is where the pivot from botched assassination to industrial-scale slaughter happens. The argument, likely pushed by Catherine and her allies, was that a Huguenot rebellion was imminent. They had to act first. It was a preemptive strike, you see, not a massacre. It was just proactive self-defense against all of their invited wedding guests. Charles IX, ever the resolute leader, reportedly resisted the idea at first. Then, in a fit of rage and panic, he completely snapped. The story goes that he started screaming, "Kill them all! Kill them all, so that no one will be left to blame me!" A truly stellar moment in responsible leadership. A list was drawn up, targeting about 50 key Huguenot leaders. The plan was a quick, surgical strike to decapitate the Protestant leadership. It was supposed to be clean, tidy, contained, which is a hilarious thought in retrospect. The signal was to be the tolling of the bell from the church of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois, just across from the Louvre. It was supposed to ring at dawn, but in the confusion and paranoia, it rang early, sometime before 3 a.m. on August 24th. The first target was Admiral Coligny. The Duke of Guise himself, Henry, waited in the courtyard below as his men stormed the admiral's lodgings. They found Coligny, wounded in bed, and stabbed him to death. Not content with that, they threw his body out the window to prove to the Duke that the job was done. This single act of political murder was the spark. As the bell kept ringing, it was joined by others across the city. The surgical strike was officially over. The phase of uncontrollable citywide bloodbath was just getting started. What the Royal Council failed to account for, or perhaps willfully ignored, was the seething hatred for Huguenots among the general Parisian population. They had been primed for this for years by radical Catholic preachers. When the killing of the nobles started, the Paris city militia and ordinary citizens decided to join the fun. It was a sectarian frenzy. People dragged their Huguenot neighbors from their homes. The violence was breathtakingly brutal. Bodies were thrown into the Seine River until it reportedly ran red. Catholic citizens marked their own houses with white crosses to avoid being mistaken for the enemy. The king's authority vanished. This wasn't a state-controlled operation anymore. It was a social explosion. It was the horrifying realization that if you tell a rabid dog to bite one person, you can't be surprised when it decides it likes the taste of blood and goes for everyone. The massacre in Paris alone would last for 3 days. Once the killing finally subsided in Paris, Charles IX had to explain what the hell had just happened. His first story was that this was all the Guise family's fault, an unfortunate escalation of their private feud with Coligny. Nobody bought it. So, 2 days later, he rode to the Parliament of Paris and tried a new angle. He declared that he had ordered the killings himself to crush a Huguenot plot against the crown. He wasn't a weak king who lost control. He was a decisive king saving the nation. The international reaction was mixed. King Philip II of Spain, a devout Catholic, was reportedly one of the few people in history to laugh in public. Pope Gregory XIII was so thrilled he commissioned Giorgio Vasari to paint celebratory frescoes in the Vatican, and had a medal struck with the motto Huguenotorum Strages, the slaughter of the Huguenots. Meanwhile, Protestant England under Elizabeth I was absolutely horrified. It was the worst PR disaster imaginable, confirming every Protestant fear about the treachery of Catholic monarchs. The news and the violence didn't stop at the gates of Paris. Word spread, and over the next few weeks, similar massacres erupted in a dozen other French cities like Orleans, Lyon, and Bordeaux. Local authorities and Catholic mobs, hearing of the king's approval, took it as a license to purge their own Huguenot populations. The total death toll is impossible to know for sure, with estimates ranging from a conservative 5,000 to a horrifying 30,000 across France. This event didn't end the French Wars of Religion. It threw gasoline on the fire. The surviving Huguenots became radicalized. They no longer trusted the monarchy. This is where a group of thinkers called the monarchomacs emerged, who basically invented the political theory that it was legitimate to overthrow a tyrannical king. So, in a way, the massacre helped lay the intellectual groundwork for future revolutions. An ironic legacy for an act meant to preserve absolute royal power. And now for the punchline, delivered with history's typical bleak irony. Who survived this whole ordeal? Henry of Navarre, the Huguenot groom whose wedding started this mess. He was spared by pledging to convert to Catholicism, an offer he accepted with what one imagines was remarkable speed. He spent the next few years as a glorified prisoner at court before escaping, converting back to Protestantism, and rejoining the fight. After years of more war, he would eventually become King Henry IV of France. And to finally bring peace to the kingdom, he famously converted back to Catholicism one last time, supposedly saying, "Paris is worth a mass." Then, as king, he issued the Edict of Nantes in 1598, granting religious toleration to the Huguenots. The very man whose marriage was supposed to symbolize peace and instead triggered a massacre ended up being the one to enforce that peace decades later. It's a perfect, tragic, and utterly ridiculous circle. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds.